Hello, this is Brad. Just want to do a quick little tour of folks who may be using Micro Four Thirds cameras and are interested in trying out legacy lenses, or perhaps interested in trying out Micro Four Thirds because they have legacy lenses. In particular, I'll be working with my Panasonic GH1 and talking about fitting legacy lenses made for the Canon FD mount form factor, like for this Canon AT1. Most of my lenses are Canon FD, because that's what I was shooting in film before. I do have a couple other options here to show. I'm working with the mount adapter from Finance from eBay. This is the Canon FD mount. See, it's got a open and lock, which moves this little pin right there for tightening down the aperture or leaving it full open. I also have the Nikon mount. Notice there's no adjuster on this one, there's just a lock pin to unlock it. Moves this tiny little pin that holds the lens in place. And also an adapter for M39 mount, which is an older screw mount for old Leicas and also for old Soviet Leica knockoffs. This is a old Soviet FED3 with its lens, so we'll show those. So I'm going to show quickly what it looks like. We've got a variety of lenses here. I've got the Canon FD mount. We've got just kind of a typical 70 to 210 zoom here. This particular one is a Sigma. This is the Vivitar 90mm macro. Got a row of 50s here. We've got the Nikon E-series, well-known pancake lens, pretty popular for something like this. It's a very compact lens. We've got a bunch of the Canons in here. We've got the Canon FD in 50mm f1.4 new mount. Sorry about that. So the new mount is recognizable by the black bottom bar and this button that you push down to unlock it. We've got the Canon FD50 in 1.8, also in the new format. You notice that the 1.4 is a slightly larger lens than the 1.8. Got a 1.8 in the old mountings. This is the twist. Usually silver, sometimes black, but typically a silver mount. And then we've got the Canon 50mm f3.5 macro with the 25mm extension tube. And that extension tube is required on film to get to, or on just any mount really, to get to a 1:1 macro ratio. We've also got a few other lenses over here. We've got a couple of 28s. This is both Canon 28s in the newer attachment, newer barrel FD and the older barrel FD. Again, you can see a little bit of the difference in size between the two. The newer ones do tend to be a little bit smaller, a little more compact. And this is the Canon 17mm f4. This is the widest angle, completely rectilinear lens made by Canon for the FD line. And then we've got Soviet 52mm f2.8 screw mount, as I mentioned. No mirror. No prism, because this is a rangefinder camera, which means the mounting depth is a lot closer to the film, which means the adapter is a lot smaller than the adapters made for SLR lenses, which have to make up for that mirror depth. You have to make sure you have this set to open when you mount an FD lens onto this, because otherwise your little arm will be on the wrong side. So now that that is mounted properly, if you look in there, you can see the aperture move when I move to the lock position. Once it's in the lock position, I rotate the aperture ring. You can see the aperture changing size. The nice thing about having this adjustable one is if you're doing something where the focus is really critical, you can have it on a fairly tight aperture. You eventually want to shoot 11, and you're focusing and using the manual focus assistance. You can pop that aperture wide open, have a super shallow depth of field, hit your critical focus, then tighten the aperture back down and fire the shot. You do have to remember to tighten the aperture back down. So as you can see, you get a little bit of extra mounting depth there, but otherwise it's a fairly well integrated lens for the 50mm on there. Now this is the Canon 50mm f1.4 with a newer mount. Again, this is fully wide open. We can tighten down the aperture. You can see some more depth of field. We're up to f8 now. And with the adapter here having that lock open thing, I can throw it directly from f8 into full open. Once the camera compensates, we can see the difference in depth of field. Do it focus there. See f8, full wide open, and then you can see how this works in video to track the depth of field across. We take a look at the Nikon mount instead. Mount these puppies up here, twist until it clicks into place. So that's the Nikon. It's a little different in that the rings are actually rotating in the opposite directions. You actually turn this way to open the aperture, whereas on the Canon, you can see that the scale's 22 is on the left here, 22 is on the right on this one. So that's a little adjustment if you're used to one and want to use the other. See, also a relatively well integrated lens, but more mounting depth has to be added to that Nikon format than it does for the Canon. In the end, the total length is not that different between the two 50s. Canon is a little bit longer once mounted on there. But the pancake doesn't save you a whole ton on the Nikon. It is a really nice lens though. Now I've got regular 50mm. This is the 50mm Nikon E-series pancake mounted right now. You can see as I tighten up the aperture, you can see the depth of field we're gaining. But wide open. You can see the type of depth of field that we're dealing with this lens. So we look at one of these lenses mounted. We're just going to quickly unmount the stock lens, line up our red dot, snap that on. See, that fits pretty closely onto the camera there. It's a pretty nice fit. Makes for a fairly slick looking mount. Which is one of the neat things about those. And there are a bunch of those older Soviet lenses in M39 available. We can mount the FD adapter on here. This is with the lens off the FED3 rangefinder, little Soviet 52mm. Unfortunately, it cannot focus as closely as the Nikon and Canon, so I'm going to have to back it up so we can get within the focal range of this camera. And there you can see that this is fully open at f2.8. And again, the aperture can be adjusted. On the fly here, there's f8 with that lens. You know, a lot of people ask about macros. Let's see here, make sure it's set to open. Dots line up. The 90mm macro, Vivitar macro, is a large, heavy lens. And to give you an idea, when you get this thing out to 1:1, notice the number of turns it takes to get out to 1:1. You have a very large lens that levers way out in front of the body. So it ends up best to hold it out on the lens rather than on the body when you're shooting with this. And when you're that close, it's hard to keep your focal distance in there, so it's best to do it on a tripod and see if you can get like a collar mount for a tripod for this, because of the weight distribution. So that is a hefty macro lens. The 50s, Vivitar makes a 55mm as well, same style as this one, only smaller. Now with the Vivitar 90mm macro in place, it's hard to see this shallow depth of field here. Crank the aperture down. And you can see the depth of field change. We're going to get some problems with the expanding on the video here. You see the magnification. These are both 1:1 macro lenses. The 50mm Canon with the extension tube and the 90mm Vivitar. The difference is that I'm getting 1:1 from further away with the 90mm, so I don't have to be exactly on top of it like you do with the 50mm. Gives you a little more breathing room, which can be nice, particularly if you're dealing with something like an insect or something that, or you want to not get in the way of the light. Look at the Canon. Mount that on there. Lock it down. When this gets extended all the way out. Also a fairly long lens, as you can see, not nearly as long and heavy as the Vivitar 90. And of course the extension tube can be removed if you don't need to get all the way down to that 1:1. Both are good macro lenses. I enjoy shooting macro, they're both fun to shoot with. Just want to show you quickly, this is the Canon 50mm f3.5 macro with extension tube mounted. This is it, kind of the lowest magnification for this mount. If I keep cranking this out, I'll lose focus for a moment here. Once I get it all the way out to its maximum magnification, and then I move in a bit, you can get an idea of the magnification that we're talking about. With maximum extension on the Canon 50mm f3.5 macro. See that little bit of dust on the, underneath Lincoln's chin on the penny there. Pretty good idea of what we're capable of doing. The 28s are pretty compact lenses, particularly this new mount 28. You see it's slightly smaller than the 50, similar size, integrates fairly well. It's a nice little lens. It's my camera in the same position as with the 50mm lenses. This is the 28mm Canon newer mount. Similar thing, we're wide open at f2.8 right now. We can bring that in a little bit to f8 again. And similarly, I can pop it with this lock open lever from wide open down to f8. Haven't really shot with this on the 17 on there. I mean, that's a something where you probably end up not very many people wanting to spend. This will probably run you $150 used, and you know, with the available super compact 20 with autofocus and all that on these, doubt that someone's going to pay for the 17, which is not a compact lens. This is a great lens on the film, on the shooting this regularly on the Canon film cameras. I quite enjoy this lens, having a wide rectilinear like that, but not particularly practical for this application. Same position now with the Canon 17mm f4 wide angle lens. Doesn't look super crazy wide angle on the 2x crop factor of the micro four thirds, but you can see it's significantly more wide than those previous lenses.